Before Napoleon, before Caesar, there was Hannibal, a name that for centuries would be used by Roman mothers to frighten their children into obedience. He was not a king or an emperor, but the son of a defeated general, born into a world of humiliation. His nation, Carthage, a great maritime empire, had been brought to its knees by the rising power of Rome in the First Punic War. His father, Hannibal Barca, a brilliant commander in his own right, was forced to accept a bitter peace. Legend tells us that Hannibal brought his 9-year-old son Hannibal to a sacrificial altar. There he made the boy place his hand on the offering and swear a sacred blood oath that as long as he lived, he would never be a friend of Rome. This was not just a promise, it was the forging of a destiny. Hannibal was raised in military camps, learning strategy from his father and battlefield command alongside his soldiers. He inherited not only his father's genius, but also his burning, all-consuming hatred for the Republic that had shamed his people. When he took command of the Carthaginian armies in Spain, he was no longer just a general. He was an instrument of vengeance. He began to meticulously plan an act of war so audacious, so utterly unthinkable, that Rome would never see it coming. He would not wait for the war to come to him. He would take the war to the very heart of his enemy. In 218 BC, Rome declared war, expecting a conventional conflict fought in Spain and at sea. They had no idea what Hannibal was about to unleash. He gathered his army, a force of nearly 100,000 infantry, cavalry, and a terrifying new weapon he intended to unveil: 36 war elephants. But he would not attack by sea. He would attack by land. His plan was insane. He would march his army from Spain, across the Pyrenees Mountains, through hostile Gaul, and then achieve the impossible: cross the mighty snow-capped Alps to descend into Italy from the north. It was a journey of 1,000 miles through treacherous terrain, fighting hostile tribes every step of the way. The crossing of the Alps became one of the most legendary feats in military history. His men faced blizzards, avalanches, and dizzying mountain passes. The massive elephants, terrified and unsuited to the cold, slipped and fell from narrow cliffside paths. Thousands of soldiers and animals perished, lost to the cold, starvation, and enemy ambushes. When Hannibal finally emerged into the plains of northern Italy, his army was a shadow of its former self. He had lost nearly half his men and most of his elephants. A lesser commander would have been finished. But for Hannibal, this was just the beginning. He had done the impossible. He was in Rome's backyard, and the Romans were utterly unprepared. The Romans were arrogant. They dispatched army after army to crush this impudent invader, and Hannibal annihilated them all. At the Battle of the Trebia, he used the cold and the river to his advantage, smashing a superior Roman force. At Lake Trasimene, he laid one of the largest and most successful ambushes in history, trapping and destroying an entire consular army in a narrow pass. But his masterpiece was yet to come. In 216 BC, near a small village called Cannae, Hannibal faced the largest army Rome had ever put into the field, over 80,000 men, determined to crush him with sheer numbers. Hannibal, with only 50,000, did something revolutionary. He intentionally placed his weakest troops, his Gallic infantry, in the center of his line, allowing it to bulge forward. As the massive Roman legions pressed their attack, Hannibal's center slowly gave way, bending backward in a controlled retreat. The Romans, sensing victory, pushed deeper and deeper into the sagging Carthaginian line. They had fallen into his trap. As the Romans surged forward, Hannibal's elite African infantry, held in reserve on the flanks, swung inward. At the same time, his superior cavalry, having defeated their Roman counterparts, circled around and attacked the Roman rear. The Roman army was now completely surrounded. The battle became a slaughter. In a single afternoon, Hannibal's army killed or captured over 70,000 Roman soldiers. It was, and remains, the most perfect tactical victory in military history. Rome was broken, defenseless, and gripped by absolute terror. Hannibal was at the gates. After the apocalypse at Cannae, Rome was on the verge of total collapse. Hannibal's generals urged him to march on the city itself, but Hannibal hesitated. He lacked the siege equipment and the manpower to take the heavily fortified capital. This decision would haunt history. Instead of destroying Rome, he hoped to break it. He believed that after such a devastating loss, Rome's Italian allies would flock to his side, and the Republic would sue for peace. He had miscalculated. He was not fighting an army, he was fighting an idea, the idea of Rome. Despite their catastrophic losses, the Romans refused to negotiate. They refused to even acknowledge defeat. A new leader emerged, Quintus Fabius Maximus, who understood he could not beat Hannibal in a pitched battle. So he created a new strategy, one that would earn him the nickname the Cunctator, or the Delayer. The Fabian strategy was simple: shadow Hannibal's army, cut off his supplies, harass his foragers, but never ever engage him in a major battle. For Hannibal, this was maddening. He was the master of the battlefield, but the Romans were now refusing to give him a battlefield. He had conquered their armies, but he could not conquer their will. His greatest strength, tactical genius, was being neutralized. The war had changed. It was no longer a series of glorious battles, but a slow, grinding war of attrition. For more than a decade, Hannibal remained in Italy, a master of a war he could not win. He was an undefeated general trapped deep in enemy territory. He won every engagement, but each victory was hollow. He couldn't protect his few Italian allies and simultaneously threaten Rome. His army, a brilliant instrument of war, was slowly being worn down by years of constant marching and skirmishing. His greatest weakness was his distance from home. Carthage, ruled by a cautious merchant oligarchy that was often jealous of his success, failed to send him the reinforcements and siege engines he desperately needed to finish the job. He had proven he could defeat Rome's armies, but he could not defeat its vast resources and manpower. For every soldier Rome lost, it could raise 2 more. For every soldier Hannibal lost, there was no replacement. This was the dawning, creeping realization. He was the greatest general in the world, leading an army that had never known defeat. Yet the war was slowly slipping through his fingers. He had won the battles, but he was now undeniably losing the war. Rome wasn't beating Hannibal's army, it was simply outlasting it. While Hannibal was trapped in Italy, a new Roman general had emerged, one who had studied Hannibal's tactics and was willing to use them against him. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio. Instead of fighting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio did the unthinkable. He took the war to Carthage itself, invading North Africa. The panicked Carthaginian Senate did the one thing the Romans had failed to do for 15 years. They forced Hannibal to leave Italy. In 203 BC, he was recalled to defend his homeland. The great invader was now the great defender. The final epic confrontation came in 202 BC on the plains of Zama. It was a duel of giants, Hannibal, the aging master, against Scipio, his brilliant young student. For the first time, Hannibal faced a Roman commander who was his equal in tactical skill and who commanded a superior army. Scipio used Hannibal's own tactics against him, neutralizing his war elephants and using superior cavalry to envelop his flanks. At Zama, Hannibal Barca suffered his first and last major defeat. The battle was decisive. Carthage was utterly broken and forced to accept a humiliating peace. The Second Punic War was over. After his defeat, Hannibal was hounded into exile by the Romans, who would never forgive the terror he had inflicted upon them. He wandered the courts of Eastern kings, a legendary general for hire, still trying to ignite a war against his hated enemy. But his time had passed. Hunted and cornered in his final years, he finally drank poison, choosing death over the humiliation of capture. His life was a grand and glorious tragedy. He was arguably the most brilliant military tactician who ever lived. He crossed the Alps, brought the mighty Roman Republic to its knees, and won a victory at Cannae that is still studied in military academies today. Yet he failed. His story is the ultimate testament to the difference between tactics and strategy. He was a master of the battlefield, but he could not overcome the resilience of the Roman people, the political failures of his own government, and the simple, brutal math of attrition. He had kept his sacred oath. He was never a friend of Rome. But in his quest for vengeance, he had ensured the very thing he sought to prevent, the absolute and uncontested mastery of the world by the Roman Republic.